Yeah, I know. The title of the video probably looks suspiciously like clickbait, but I'm not lying when I say that I hate Thaddeus Noble. This is primarily because I'm an irascible contrarian. I don't hate bad characters out of hand. Wastes of space like Thalmachus, Azrael, or Cutscoden I'm generally apathetic toward. Hell, I even enjoy some of them for their unique quirks regardless of how well they perform. What really gets my blood up is the hyperbolic and unwarranted praise for mediocre characters that get memed so hard people actually invest in them, subsequently adding their voices to the chorus of drivel to cope with the fact that they've wasted their resources. This is extremely prevalent on Reddit, where they have this son of a bitch glazed so heavily you could use him to soundproof your windows. Well, enough is enough. As far as I'm concerned, it's time to pull a French Revolution on this noble. With that being said, I concede that I've been built moderately for the unique utility he can offer, and in respect to the raid meta of 18 months ago, but I'm not under any delusions about him being a top tier character, and frankly it annoys me to see him being referred to as such so frequently. What does this praise come down to? Ultimately, I think it's monkey see big number, monkey brain light up. If you were around for the release of the Malleus launcher, also known as the sixth piece of shit Imperial Guard character, you might remember that it was hyped up as the best option by Nandi, in a video that I believe has, if I'm correct, since been rightfully deleted, due to it being able to deal the most damage directly to bosses out of all of the Machine of War options. Of course, I went for the Biovore because I know that its synergy with my mechanical raid team was far more important than dumb, raw damage output, and this is also the first strike against Noble. There's no denying that his raw damage output is at the very top of what's on offer from characters in this game, but it comes with a few glaring issues attached. Much like with the Malleus launcher, one of those issues is synergy. What does he work well in a team with? Because no man is an island, especially not in Tacticus. Well, he works with heavy weapons characters, i.e. nothing that is relevant to the guild raid meta. And no, Malgan Ra is not a good raid character. Ranged multi-hit meta is like so last year. You're living in the past, you're coping, and you're lacking the clarity of being presented with a reset stone that should have been distributed for the sodomization Ra received at the paws of Ragnar. This reality automatically discounts Noble from guild raids, where his only meaningful contribution is to be able to add neuroparasite stacks with his active ability and ranged attack. I can understand someone who's built him for his elite campaign using him as an interim character in a Neurophrope raid team or maybe a low-level multi-hit team, but if you're serious about building a Neurophrope raid team, there are many superior options available. A mechanical team for a start, but let's not pour salt on that particular wound. As for Noble's damage output itself, it is often deceptively low despite its raw wow factor. And this page that I'm on the Tacticus wiki is called Stat Chart. It's a very useful page. And what it shows you is the base stats of all characters, so you can compare them on an equal footing with each other. So here is Thaddeus Noble. His base damage is 38 and he deals 3 hits, which gives him a total damage per attack of 114 damage units in terms of the base stats. So 114 damage, where is that in comparison to other characters? Well, if I sort by damage, going from highest to lowest, God's Will in a single hit deals 60 damage, so it's basically like doing 2 hits from God's Will. If I scroll down to where Khan is, Khan deals 25 base damage. Khan is in the middle of the screen now, and he deals 4 hits, so that's a combined total of 100 base damage. So Thaddeus actually outdamages Khan, and I don't think anyone would argue that Khan is a low damaging character. Even with the sort of fuzziness that his extra damage from his passive deals in, it's obvious that his attack is very powerful. So Noble's damage output, it is, in raw terms, it is good, but in practical terms, it's often deceptively low despite its raw wow factor. As his ranged attack deals 3 hits, a hit reduction of 1 against it, as may be provided by the camouflage or big target traits, represents a 1/3 drop in damage output. A 2/3 drop can be achieved by placing a character in tall grass or, again, by the camouflage trait at free range. Another issue of it dealing 3 hits is how armour works in the game. Noble's blast damage has a pierce ratio of 15%, which means that in order to deal any real damage, he has to be exceeding the armor cap of his target with his damage output. So again, Noble's base damage per hit is 38. So to see how his damage output is affected by armor, Subtract the armor stat of an equivalently leveled character from his base damage to find out just how much he suffers. So what I'm going to do is go to the top and sort by armor, going from lowest to highest. So Mesa, the character with the weakest armor stat in the game, has a base armor of 10. So 10 over 38 represents a 26% reduction in Noble's damage output, and that's against the character with the weakest armor, on equal footing. So Noble's practical power is profoundly affected by his target's armor stat, which makes him very good for punching down at weak targets, but not proficient at all when it comes to punching above his weight. His prowess when it comes to being able to kill single targets isn't even that impressive either. About the toughest equivalently leveled character he can take out from high ground with greater than or equal to 50% certainty, accounting for random damage variation, is Vitruvius. And Vitruvius is a heavy-hitting support unit that I don't think anyone would argue is intended to be much of a tank. So I'm just going to demonstrate how I came to that conclusion. So if you look at the stats of Vitruvius here, he's in the middle of the screen. His base health is 90, his base armor is 18. So Thaddeus is dealing 38 damage per hit, subtract 18 from that, gives you 20 damage. Multiply that by 3, you get 60 damage for an attack from Thaddeus against Vitruvius. And then if you give him 50% bonus damage from high ground, that takes his damage output up to 90, which happens to be Vitruvius's health stat. So yeah, on a completely average attack from Thaddeus, he will be able to kill Vitruvius in one hit from high ground. Now, using this chart, upon checking out the base stats of every character in Tacticus, I concluded that, disregarding crits, Noble is able to reliably, i.e. more than 50% of the time, kill a mere 35 equivalently leveled characters from high ground out of a total of 90 characters. And that's with the proviso that reducing Mesa and Yarrick to 1 HP due to their resilient trait is taken as a quote-unquote kill. Bear in mind that this was not even taking into account equipable armor items and block items, increasing the tankiness of his targets. Although, to be fair to Noble, I again wasn't taking his up to 40% crit chance into account either, so make of that what you will. When someone pulls out the tired line of Noble's ranged attack being a delete button, I think it should automatically come with an asterisk that states, Noble is a delete button to any character as long as they aren't any stronger than him, aren't outside the frailest third of characters, he doesn't have his hits reduced, he gets good RNG on his damage roll, he has the high ground, and maybe if he has a buffer backing him up and or he manages to crit, and probably not if they have any sort of damage reduction effect on them. But I can understand why the people singing his praises wouldn't want to paint such a realistic picture of his quote-unquote power. The disclaimer is just lacking a certain je ne sais quoi. Not only this, but there is the grim reality that this damage stat is tied to Noble himself. What do I mean by this? Well, consider the Gene Stealer cults, a faction whose health and armor stats, barring the pay to mine, are balanced around being able to die and resurrect, and thus have extremely poor survivability to balance them. The weakest of these characters, Zybia, has a base health stat of 55. Now let's sort by health. Oh look at the only character that happens to be above Zybia, Thaddeus Noble. Yep, Noble's base health is 50, literally the lowest out of any character in the entire game, and he doesn't even have the decency to come back after he's killed, although with how detestable he is, that might actually be a good thing. Granted, his armor stat at 18 isn't the worst, but it still puts him within the bottom 50% of all characters by a comfortable margin. And any incoming damage that is forced to use its pierce ratio will still take considerable chunks out of his pathetic health pool. You may counter this by saying he is intended to be used as a quasi-sniper unit that needs to be protected, but unfortunately in this game if someone is in range of you, you're probably in range of them. Terrain and his indirect fire can make these deficiencies workable, but the bevy of popular, high-mobility characters available in-game, especially in modes like Tournament Arena, don't work in his favour, and using him to make a kill often just ends in a trade in any serious fight. And if you're relying on favourable terrain to make one of your characters usable in Tournament Arena, you're barking up the wrong tree. So let's take a step back for a moment and take a look at what has been established so far. Its ranged damage output is highly overrated by people seeing its raw total as being the highest in the game and ending their critical thinking there. He has no place in any respectable guild raid team. His survivability is rock bottom, arguably the worst of any character bar a couple of others, due to him lacking any manner of defensive trait. Got all that? Okay, time to continue shitting on him. Speaking of defensive traits, let's just take a look at his general characteristics. And I have his page open here. Oh yeah, that one. So, general characteristics. At the top. So he has a blast damage range attack, las damage melee attack, and the indirect fire and suppression traits. Do you notice something here? There's just a teeny tiny issue of literally none of these characteristics meeting LRE requirements outside of generic ranged or X number of hits or no X, i.e. no power damage or no final vengeance trait requirements. Yes, this is another game mode where Noble is bad and not worth building. If I was being charitable, I might concede that perhaps one day Suppression and Blast might be LRE requirements, but it wouldn't take Sherlock Holmes to deduce that I'm in no mood to hand out pity points here. Noble is pure trash, and whilst meeting requirements isn't the be-all, end-all of LRE performance, he does nothing that better characters can't achieve. His range and damage are positives, but he's sorely let down by his survivability, lack of splash damage, and abilities. Yep, Noble's abilities are plain awful. His passive buff is too weak and limited in scope to be of any use in raids, as previously stated, and there's not much going for it elsewhere in the game, so it gives a maximum of plus 800 damage. With the exceptions of Malgunra and, to a lesser extent, Cygex and Vindicta, this flat per hit nature of the passive buff is undermined by the generally low hit count of heavy weapons users. Given that Overwatch meta is long since past in Tournament Arena, I just don't see much of a place for it. His active ability is an RNG crapshoot that can fail to kill even just moderately tanky, equivalently leveled targets when fully charged up, as I found out when using it against Godswill in Tournament Arena. Granted, Godswill, he's actually decently tanky, but even so, it's quite an indictment on this ability that you have to wait for it to charge up for 5 rounds and it still can't just delete any character off the face of the earth. Or, well, whatever planet they happen to be fighting on. So one of the legitimate uses of this ability is to put pressure on players with squishy characters to act before it is able to delete one of them in Tournament Arena. This is usually not relevant due to the brevity of Tournament Arena matches, and bringing along turds like Noble will only serve to make your matches all the briefer. Another use is for use on defensive teams in Guild Wars, where its ability to strike all the way across the map discourages attackers from using underleveled utility characters such as Yazagor. If you care about this, it's something I can't fault him on, but it's not exactly worthy of fanfare, I think anyone can agree. Lastly, there's the thing that's always brought up. It's effective against Overwatch, and oh my god, people love to make a mountain out of this molehill. Due to meta shifts, dealing with Overwatch is not nearly as pressing an issue as it used to be in normal arena, as well as in the tournament arena, and only being able to use this ability once per battle is another glaring limitation on it. Fact of the matter is, there are plenty of characters that can deal with Overwatch whilst being broadly far more useful than Noble. My personal favourite is Maladus, who can calmly tank Overwatch even from Ravas, and then go on to attack a target of choice rather than being forced to attack the tanky bullet sponge that is Ravas just to disable her, as Thaddeus Noble is forced to do. Me bringing up Ravas here is very deliberate, because when people say that he's good against Overwatch, what they actually mean is he's good against her. Compared to his performance against other Overwatchers, I wholeheartedly agree, but only because his performance in that regard is so underwhelming. After everything I've said here, do you really want to pour precious Imperial badges into upgrading his active ability, regardless of how effective it may be? I suppose there may be regions of the world where lobotomies are still performed, so I'll just say that you'll have to be prepared to use his active in the second round of an arena fight, as you usually won't have any further time to delay contact with the enemy. If you do use it later in the battle than this, its ability to cancel out Overwatch will almost certainly be irrelevant at that point. If you use the ability in the second round, to be on the safe side, you'll have to operate under the assumption that 80% of its damage output will be simply pissed into the wind, due to its inaccuracy. Its potential high damage output on paper becomes largely meaningless. I can't stress enough how anemic this ability is, even as a utility. A well-placed Spore Mine can do as good a job at dealing with enemy Overwatch, better even, because unlike Fuckwitter Ignoble, the Biovore isn't a waste of a character slot. Sure, he can use his normal ranged attack to deal with Overwatch as well, but thanks to his range of 3, he won't be suppressing any snipers before they get a shot off at him anyway, unless you're lucky enough to be able to utilise his indirect fire trait. Here's a better idea. Build one of the other, better characters, all of them, that can also deal with Overwatch, and use them instead. Build a character that can punch up against stronger targets, a good buffer, a really heavy hitter, an infinite summoner, a tanky healer, a terminator, and you'll have yourself a good arena team. Hell, just use your raid characters if you're building them tall. And of course, there's one thing for certain with raid characters that should be built tall. Noble isn't one of them. If Noble is the only solution you can think of to handle Ravas, you need to think harder, because being able to bully 2-range Overwatchers with his suppressive fire is not the slam dunk victory for Noble that people try to make it out to be. Nobody is crapping their pants over Azrael or Immerspec after all. Noble died the moment Malgan Ra dropped out of the raid meta. In other words, his reputation has been kept alive by a game of Chinese whispers that has been going on for over a year. And, unfortunately for the player base, Thaddeus Noble is a message simple enough that even drooling cretins can continue to propagate it without dilution or error, as Reddit so abundantly proves. To anyone who will defend this abortion of a character to the hilt, if you really love him so much, regardless of how good he may be statistically, why wouldn't you want him to be improved? You're allowed to like crap, but delusional circle jerks about him being amazing will ensure that Snowprint feels little pressure to change him for the better, and descend him from the abyss of irrelevant mediocrity. Stop making excuses for him. You deserve better.